Today, we're going to talk about the vision document. Let's go ahead and get started. Every company that I've ever worked for has some type of a vision document. Now, they may not call it that, by the way. It might be called something else. It might be called a comprehensive business case. It could be a comprehensive architectural assessment. So it goes by many other names. But I will tell you that they all kind of basically follow the same format and structure that a vision document does. So a vision document is something that's been around for probably 15 or 20 years now, that specific terminology. And there are some templates around that have been built up over time that are all based around this concept for a vision document. I've provided for you a template that we're going to be using in this course to help you articulate the big idea for a project or a system. So let's get into a little bit further, what is involved in this? Well, first of all, you got to remember what the vision document is. It's really kind of the primary means for communication for all stakeholders in a project. So you're typically going to have a business owner that's going to have an idea, and you are the IT professional, you want to document that. And so you're going to have to capture all this information and put it into a formal written document. You need to be able to give the readers of this document an overall understanding of the system that's going to be built. And it should be self-contained. It should stand on its own. When somebody gets this document, they should be able to read it, understand what the big idea is, understand all the requirements for the system at a very high level, understand what kind of features are going to be involved, and potentially how long will it take and what will it cost. Because this is kind of a critical document in many IT organizations, this can actually become a contract sometimes. So companies might choose to outsource the creation of a system, and this might actually form part of that contract that you would engage in external services with. But regardless of whether you're going to do it internally or use some type of external IT group, ultimately people are going to have to sign off and approve of this system. Because every system costs a lot of money. And so you want to be able to define what it is that they're going to build or what they're going to get for a particular amount of time and money that they're going to invest. It's also a great opportunity to get feedback from the customer. So if you write all the information down in one comprehensive document, you can go ahead and distribute it to people and they can provide feedback. You can also use it to help prioritize the features of a system. So when you build applications today using agile approaches or kind of more modern engineering techniques, we generally don't try and build the system at one time. We generally try and build it a little part of the system that provides the most amount of value. We usually build that first, and then over time, we enlarge the system by building on the basic foundation, adding more and more functionality, and ultimately end up with a complete working system. Hopefully, we'll get everybody on the same book or on the same page. So the last thing I want to say about a vision document is it just ensures that everybody clearly knows that they've had some involvement into the process, that we as an IT person have heard them, we understand what it is that they want, and that we've identified or documented it in a very professional way. I should also mention one last thing, is that in the typical document template, this is right from the workplace. So I have simplified it a little bit. And in fact, I will tell you what is not in the template right now that may or may not be in other people's templates. The first thing is the positioning of the opportunity. So somebody has a big idea. You put the big idea in the vision document. This is what we want to do. You might describe the business opportunity. What market are we trying to service? Who are the targets for this system? Is it seniors? Is it school-age children? Is it, people of a particular gender or of an interest segment? That kind of thing. What's the size of the market? How big is the opportunity? How much are people willing to spend on technology in that space? You might also want to look at alternatives. Who are the competitors in the market as well? And when you talk about competitors, it's best to pick 2 or 3 specific competitors. Who are the leaders in this space? You want to be able to talk about the licensing and installation potentially that might be involved in your system. So that's kind of the positioning is really important. And the other thing is that you typically identify all the different stakeholders that really have an interest in your project. And that could include governmental agencies, regulatory bodies, corporate executives, all kinds. It could be customers, all kinds of individuals. You would typically find this document as well. But again, because this is a school project, we typically don't like to include this level of detail in the vision document. And so I've just kind of removed that from the vision template. So I've mentioned that I've already got a template for you. So let's go ahead and review the template today. You might want to download the template from Fanshawe Online and take a look at that template as we're going through this video presentation. So it may involve actually printing it out, and that's fine, but at least it'll help you understand what it is as I go through the various sections of the template. So what is a vision document? Well, every system starts with what we call a big idea. Somebody wants to do something at the end of the day. We need some way in IT to identify or to write down and memorialize what the concept was. Why does somebody want to build a system? And in fact, to describe that, we want the customer, the person that we're building the system for, to describe it in really 2 or 3 key sentences from really a high-level perspective. We ultimately want to try and understand what this is, what system is, this system is, and how is it different from other applications. So we want it to be a direct and simple terms. What is this? So let's say I was an airline and I wanted to build a frequent flyer program. The big idea, I want to build a frequent flyer application to reward our customers for their loyal patronage. Every time a customer flies with our airline, they will accumulate points that can then be used to buy travel for free or at least some reduced amount. So that's the big idea. Well, when somebody has an idea like that, it would be okay if we just wrote it down on a sheet of paper or in a word processing document. But in fact, in reality, in IT organizations, we want to articulate or capture that idea and all the information that goes along with it in some kind of standardized document. And that's where the vision document comes in. Product features. Think of it when you want to get a new piece of software, or if you're buying a new computer, or you're buying a new car. How do you base that decision? Well, typically what you do is you look at the list of features. What does the product do fundamentally? And so, although the vision statement might tell you that this is an application and this is kind of at a very high level what it does, what you have to do with the feature list is really kind of create almost a marketing list from most to least important of what will the system do for you? What are the high-level capabilities? What features or benefits will you derive from using the system? So again, you want to be able to kind of sell the users or the readers of this document on how valuable this system is and why would people want to buy it. The feature list also helps you understand or place a scope around the system. So you cannot, with any application, you're never going to be able to build all of the requirements into an application that you'd like to have. And especially at first, like as you start to build the system, you're not going to be able to include hundreds and hundreds of features. So by having a product feature list, what it really does allow you to do is to focus in on what is most important to the customer. What do they want to see? I should also mention in terms of really when you're creating this feature list. Typically what we do is we create a bulleted list. And we usually mention the feature in a single line. So if this was a golfing application, the feature might be is that the system will automatically arrange tee times for a customer at a golf course in the area. So that might be the feature. On top of that, then you might describe in a little bit more detail as to how it's going to work. A golfer can input the parameters of their golf game, including the number of golfers and the total amount of golf, or the total amount that they want to pay for a tee time. In addition, I'd like a tee time between 2 in the afternoon and 3 in the afternoon at a 9-hole golf course, not your typical 18-hole golf course. And the system will automatically take those preferences and search the golf courses in the area and provide you with a list of courses and tee times that match your criteria. So that's really in a nutshell what that feature description might be. So you typically give a one-line, what is the feature, and then back that up with 2 or 3 sentences that describe it. Again, and I know I said this already, but you want to do it from the very most important to the least important. And it should read like any kind of marketing document you'd see for anything that you might want to buy. For many applications, it's important to understand, what is the opportunity? Where did this idea come from? Why are you building the system? Is this product being developed for internal use at a company? Or is it really something that's going to be destined to be in the marketplace, something that's available for sale? You also want to look at the demographics. So in the case of something that is going to be for sale, well, what is the actual segmentation of the market? Is there a particular age, gender, skill, ability of user you're going after? What's the size of the market? So here's your opportunity to really describe, why you're building it in terms of the opportunity itself. When building any application, it's important to look at what's available in the marketplace. What competitors are out there? Even if you're building this for a company, you should understand what products exist and why you're building this one in particular. Why is there a need? So when looking at products, you want to look for kind of what we call the best of breed solutions. So there's a lot of different sources of information available. I don't have a specific source to direct you to, other than to say, Google it. Sorry. The next part of the document needs to describe the risk involved in building the system. There'll be business risk and technical risk on any project, and we want to be able to kind of, as a developer, identify both of those if possible. So, for example, from a business perspective, will the people that want to buy your product find it useful? Is there a need in the marketplace? There might be a need in the marketplace, but based upon your price, is that a reasonable price to pay for that system? Will it be popular amongst the market demographics that you've chosen? How will it fare against other competitors in the space? If you're going to produce a product that competes against Facebook, how are you going to be able to achieve that? So you want to be able to define what is the business risk, and then how will you avoid, reduce, or mitigate that risk. So you typically would include strategies to, again, soften the blow. So if you want to compete against Facebook, how would you reduce your risk? Well, you want to make sure that you clearly understand the market drivers behind using Facebook. You want to identify the flaws in the product. What are people looking for that Facebook doesn't currently provide? And then how can you exploit that? So it's not just identifying the risk, but it's building a strategy to go along with that risk. So that's risk from a business perspective. But how about a technical perspective? Well, what if you're using a brand new tool for the first time? What if you've got people on your development team that are new development resources that are just recently graduated from a college program, and you may not have a good understanding of their skills and abilities? Maybe you're trying to do something that's really difficult at the end of the day, and you don't really know from a technical perspective how to solve the problem right now. And I've been on a lot of projects where that happens. So when we think of risks, one, we want to identify them. And secondly, we want to build a strategy to either avoid, mitigate, or deal with the risk in some way. I mentioned earlier, we want to have stakeholders part of the system. So when we think of the stakeholders in general terms, we would normally think of anybody that's got an interest in the project. The CEO of the company, the COO, directors, managers, the governing bodies, the users of the system, and so on. Again, I'm not asking for that in the templates that we're going to build. So what I've done is I really want you, in terms of stakeholders, to really describe just two groups of people. So kind of subgroups for your templates. I want you to identify, first of all, the project team. Who's working on the project? And what is each person responsible for? So you might have a project team of 5 people. What is their role? Are they the Scrum Master, the product owner? What responsibilities do they have? Are they going to be designing the system, coding the application, doing the UX work? I mean, what is it they're going to do? So one thing I'd like to have you do on any vision document that you do here at the college is to list out who's on the project team and what are their development responsibilities. In addition, I also want you to identify any functional roles that are going to be involved in defining the requirements for the application. So let me just spend a little time and talk about this. When we build a system, we want to be able to define the functionality of the system. What will the system do in detail? And in fact, I've got some slides that are going to cover that. What are the requirements for the system? So that's important. But where do those requirements come from? Well, let's say you're trying to build an automated restaurant menuing system. What if you wanted to be able to go into a restaurant and sit down and using some technology, an iPad, for example, or some type of tablet, what if you wanted to be able to look at the menu, to build your order, to pay for your order, all right from the comfort of your seat at a restaurant? Okay, so that's kind of the big idea. We want to build an electronic menuing system. Well, who's going to provide that information? So, in other words, what roles exist in that business that potentially can provide requirements for your application? So again, we're building a menuing system at a restaurant. Well, who works there? Well, you're going to have the restaurant manager, and they're going to have a specific set of requirements. You're going to have servers. Who are the people that are going to bring the food to your table? You're going to have food preparation people. So who's actually creating the orders, cooking the food, preparing it to be served? You're going to have cleaning staff, people that are going to go and clean the tables after you've had that delicious meal. So there's going to be lots of different roles that will participate in this application. You need to articulate a list of all the individuals, the different types of roles that are going to participate in building and using this application. So in a restaurant, like I say, it'll be managers, servers, food prep, and cleanup people. In a library, it might be the librarian. It could be members of the library, so people that borrow materials. It could be management of the library. It could be the book publishers that go along with it. So again, it may be helpful, and I know in the template, even though we've defined these roles early, until you understand how requirements work, you may not be able to create a good list of functional roles. So I wanted to put it out there. I wanted to talk about it in advance, but you may not fully appreciate what a role is until we get to that section of the vision template. One last thing I wanted to mention about functional roles. We cannot put the names of real people in the document. So even though Wendy might manage the restaurant, you would not put in this list of roles. You wouldn't put in Wendy's name. And if Denise is doing the food prep, you wouldn't put Denise's name in there as well. You want to look at in terms of more, what are the job titles that they have? Restaurant manager, server, food prep, bus person. So hopefully you get at least at a high level kind of an understanding of what I mean by role. I've already kind of mentioned requirements. Well, first of all, we have two types of requirements when we build a system. There are functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So you need to distinguish between those. So what are functional requirements? A functional requirement really describes a single functional aspect of a system. What do you want the system to do? Let's use an example again to help us understand that. So let's say you want to borrow books from a library. We have to have a requirement that defines how does a person get a library card? What's the process? What is the functionality to get that library card? So that's one piece of functionality the system has. We have to be able to allow people to get a library card. Another requirement. As a member, I want to be able to check materials out of the library. Again, that's another functional requirement. And think about what functional requirements are. It is the functionality that you want the developer to build into the system. That's really what it is. You're defining in very clear terms what it is that you want the developer to build in kind of a long list of functional requirements. What if a person is late returning the materials? Another functional requirement, they will be assessed a fine and will have to pay for that in order to borrow new materials. What if you wanted to allow for members to reserve a material in advance? If you wanted to reserve a book at the library, you need to describe that functional requirement. Each and every one of those are functional requirements. When writing requirements, most organizations don't just allow IT developers to write the format or write the requirement in any format they want. Most companies use what's called the MICON format. So here is the format. As a role, I want to do something so that I derive some value or benefit. So think about what we just talked about in terms of functional rules. So as a library member, a restaurant server, a golfer, a frequent flyer, those are all roles. And they want to do something. They want the system to be able to provide a very specific piece of functionality. And we're going to use that to code the application. So let me give you some examples. As a library member, I want to check in or check out materials from the library so that I can borrow materials but promise to return them within a reasonable period of time. As a restaurant server, I want to accurately capture a list of what the customer ordered so that I can ensure that they receive the correct food. As a golfer, I want to schedule a tee time at a golf course so that I know I'll be able to play a round of golf at a particular time on a particular day. As a frequent flyer of an airline, I want to be able to use my frequent flyer miles to purchase a ticket so that I utilize my loyalty points. So what we're going to do is you're really identifying what is the role and ultimately what you want this particular requirement, what do you want the system to perform, and what benefit will the person receive by having this functionality be available. I will tell you right now, this is really the most important information in a vision document. If you don't get this right, then your vision document really won't be of any value. So, when we're building the actual applications, when the developers build the system, I've already mentioned that the functional requirement tells the developer what needs to be built. Conversely, you're going to have to be able to, as a developer of a system, prove that you've delivered that functional requirement as part of the complete solution. If you cannot, again, show that you can provide that functionality, then you cannot consider this part of the system finished. You will, as creating these requirements, you will put them in a particular order, from most to least valuable, typically from a business perspective. So what you're going to do is you're going to highlight, or you're going to identify what are all the kind of the functional requirements of a system. You're then going to prioritize them in terms of how valuable that functionality is. In a library, if you can't get members, if you can't have them have a membership card, they won't be able to borrow materials, hence the library can't be used. To me, that's a really important requirement. Another important requirement is you have to be able to buy books to stock the library shelves. If you have no books, you have no library. So you want to be able to organize your requirements from most to least important. You also need to estimate the amount of time it's going to take to build this requirement. So every requirement, it's going to take time and effort to build. And so we're going to have to estimate that. And a customer wants to know at the very beginning of the system, they want to know how much the system's going to cost. So think of it this way. When you first start on a project for a customer, any project, when you know the least amount about the system is when they want you to estimate what the total cost is going to be. And that's a problem. You know, if somebody wants a new car, do you want basic transportation for 4, or you want a luxury vehicle? And the cost can be pretty wide depending on what, do you want basic transportation, or do you want kind of a high-end automobile? So again, by defining the requirements and then estimating each one of them, you're going to be able to kind of generate what you believe to be the total estimate, the cost of building a system. Now, it's too difficult to explain that in today's session, how you go about estimating requirements. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information here, but to be honest, I have a whole other set of materials that are going to deal with estimating functional requirements. So I'm just going to kind of put this out there right now so you know in advance a little bit about the estimates, but I'm going to leave the bulk of the detail for another slide set in another week. So I just want to say this. Each functional requirement will have an estimate as to how long it's going to take to deliver that requirement, and we usually use a thing called the story point. Don't worry about that now. I've got it in another video. The story points that we use are usually based upon the Fibonacci sequence. And if you don't know anything about Fibonacci sequences, don't worry about that. I'll deal with that when we do estimate generation. But I will tell you one last thing about estimates. If the estimate is too large, then your requirement should be broken down further to be, you should take the single requirement and make it more granular, break it into multiple requirements. So for example, let's say you had a requirement for payment system. So you wanted to pay for fines at a library. And if that was the requirement, as a member, I need to be able to pay for any outstanding fines using a variety of payment methods so that I can re-enable my account and become a member in good standing. So that's kind of the requirement. That might take 200 hours to provide any payment method possible. So what you might do is you might break it down into 2 or 3 functional requirements. The first one being I want to be able to pay for my library fines using cash or debit cards. The second one is that I want to expand the payment processing to include credit cards. And the third requirement is I want to be able to pay for my fines using Bitcoin or some type of an electronic wallet. So again, if a functional requirement gets too large, then it might make more sense to break it down into individual functional requirements that are directed at kind of some specific activities. So that was, I think, a really good example of that. So again, don't worry too much about the estimating. We're going to handle that in a whole other slide set. In addition to functional requirements, you're also going to have non-functional requirements. So how are they different? Well, a non-functional requirement is just a statement of fact about the system that needs to be accommodated. So if you are building a mobile application, then a non-functional requirement is that we're going to build the system using the language of Swift. Or our application is designed to work on the Android platform. Or it's designed to work on Android versions 4.4 or greater. We are going to use a NoSQL database to store the data associated with our application. So it's really, they don't impact from a functional perspective. There's nothing that changes in terms of how the system functions. But it's something you just have to keep in mind when building the system. So that's just, you just need to recognize that in addition to your functional requirements, you'll have some non-functional requirements. 95% of your requirements are going to be functional requirements. 5% are going to be non-functional requirements. As mentioned, the users are going to want to know what is the total cost of the system so that they can create a budget. So you generally put this in your vision document. And you're going to put in a list of assumptions that were used in calculating those cost estimates. So the project costs are going to be based upon all of the functional requirements of the system. So that's going to be what we're going to base our estimates off of. And then the assumptions will list out things like, what's the hourly rate for the developers? Are there any equipment costs that went into our overall calculations? Are there external fees that need to be paid? Again, users want to know at the beginning of a project what a system is going to cost. And so in the template, we accommodate that. And that's it for at least covering the template itself. If you have questions, and I'm sure you might have some, use the discussion board. There are a lot of students that are emailing me. I don't prefer emails. I want you to put it in the discussion board, because if you have questions, other students have questions, you're best to put the question in there, and then I can answer it for everybody. The other thing is that periodically I like to host kind of online sessions to be able to discuss different aspects of the course. And so I will probably go ahead and schedule some time for you to go ahead and review this slide set, review this video, and look at the template. And then once you've formulated your questions, hopefully I'll be able to address them in some type of an online session. Anyways, thanks very much for your time today. I know we've covered a lot, but I think what's really important, what's most important in this, is to remember that this is just a standardized way of capturing information so that everyone that's involved in building a project, a system, know what it is, what the scope is, what the features are, and ultimately how much is it going to cost. So thank you again for your time. And if you have questions, I look forward to answering them. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.